verse? Well, architecture of persons. Talking about people. We've kind of been talking about people all day. Now we have to talk about the palace of God and how it consists of people. Now, you know, a lot of times we think God in the Old Testament, He made this tabernacle of wood and cloth, and then He made this temple of bronze and 3 different kinds of wood. You had cypress wood on the outside, cedar wood, and the most holy parts were of olive wood. So you had an olive grove, an olive garden at the center in the Holy of Holies. And that was all put up then, and now we are the temple. We are the living stones. And that's what it all meant. That's only half true. You see, before the tabernacle was made, there was a people house. And before the temple was made, there was a people house. And the tabernacle is an image of the people house, not the other way around. Okay? So when we came out of Egypt, we were organized at Mount Sinai. God had us all set up, and He had everybody arranged. And He had already set aside Aaron and his family as priests. Jethro had come, and he had given the advice to organize people in groups of 10s, 50s, 100s, and thousands, and everything was set up, and the people were given the law, the social law, in Exodus 20 through 23, 20 through 24, 20 through 23, the social law that organized the people as a society and made a house of God out of people with rulers and elders, judges, and priests. Didn't have any Levites yet. That's later on. They get put in Numbers. But this is all set up. And then, as an image of that people house, the people gathered around Mount Sinai, the people gathered around God, that symbolized in the tabernacle. So that we have in the tabernacle here's this pad here, okay? And here's this furniture inside of it. It's in here. And then that the people organized around, and here's the mountain out here, Mount Sinai, okay, the altar. The people are gathered around the mountain. Here's the mountain, and the people gather all around it. That symbolized. We have the cherubim, which are the angels, on the curtains inside here. And then we have a goat's hair tent over it, which represents the priests and Levites. Then, on top of that, we have a red ram skin, which represents the Passover people of Israel, who are the blood people, saved by the Passover lamb. And then outside of that, we have a shell of dolphin leather, which comes from the sea, which represents the mixed multitudes gathered around outside the camp of Israel. So the camp of Israel itself, we have the tabernacle in the center, we have the priests around here, and we have the Israelites around here, and we have the mixed multitude around here. That's what this means. But the people came first. First, the people house, then the symbol of the people house. In Exodus chapter 25, yes. Yeah. Exodus 25. Hang on. Running out of time. Yeah, I'll read both. Exodus 25, verse 2. Tell the sons of Israel to raise a contribution for me. From every man whose heart moves him, you shall raise my contribution. So then the people contributed gold, silver, bronze, blue, purple, and scarlet wool, linen, goat hair, ram skin, dyed red, porpoise skins, acacia wood, oil for lighting, spices for anointing, oil and fragrant incense, onyx stones and setting stones for the ephod and the breastplate, and they constructed a sanctuary made out of what? Made out of hearts. You see, all this stuff came from people's hearts. So the tabernacle was made of hearts. Good thing Valentine's Day is coming up. Think about this. Out of their hearts, see, all this stuff that they gave. Any of it come from the Gentiles. The temple now is made 50-50 by Hiram of Tyre. It's Gentile and Jews, Hebrew Israelites together. But this at this point comes only from the Israelites and from their hearts. And similarly, after the same fashion also, in Exodus chapter 35, it says, verse 4, this is the thing that Yahweh, the Lord, has commanded, saying, take from among you a contribution to the Lord, whoever is of a willing heart. So they took all this stuff up, okay, out of the hearts of the people. Verse 21 of chapter 35, everyone whose heart stirred him lifted up, and everyone whose spirit moved him came and brought the Lord's contribution for the work of the tent of meeting and all its service and the holy garments. So you see, the tabernacle was made of the hearts of the people. Similarly, the temple is made symbolic of the singers. A whole generation before the temple was made, David organized the Levitical choirs at the tabernacle and around the ark in Jerusalem. That is the people house. If you look at the Psalms, you'll find, except for about 4 or 5 Psalms, all the Psalms are written by David or Levites in his generation. There are no Psalms written by priests. Well, maybe one. The rest are written by Asaph and the sons of Korah, who are the musician Levites. All were written before the temple was made. They were written to be sung by the Levitical choir, accompanied by the instruments, just standing around in the city, around the tent where the ark was, and around the tabernacle, but there's no temple. And when David in the Psalm says, I was thinking about how the wicked always get their way, but then I came into the temple and I considered their end. You have to understand, the temple there means I came into the congregation of people. David, as a layman, was never allowed to go into the physical temple, and even if he had been, the temple wasn't built till after he'd been dead 24 years. So, when the Psalms talk about the temple, it never means the physical temple of Solomon. Ever. It always means the people house. The people gathered together. And is specific, David would have meant, I came in to the Levitical choir and I listened to what they were saying. I listened to what they were singing. And then I realized, as I stood there in the people house consisting of the choir singing the Psalms, then I understood what would happen to the wicked. Practically speaking, that's what he means. Well, see, that makes it real easy to read these, doesn't it? They mean exactly for us, exactly what they meant for David. Coming into the temple means coming to church. That's what it meant for David. That's what it meant for us. So the buildings come afterwards. The palace of God is actually his people. So the house of people is the foundational concept all along. That's not a new idea in the New Testament. All right? Well, what does that mean? Well, we don't have to have any church buildings at all. No, what it does mean is, because we still live between the times. See, we live already in the not yet. We still live in a physical body, not in a resurrection body, in this world where we live under the sun, moon, and stars. We're not under the sun, moon, and stars, under the law, the way people were in the Old Covenant. We don't have to observe the sun, find out when the vernal equinox is, and then watch for the first new moon, and that's the first day of the first month, and then count 15 days and have a worship festival. Okay? We don't have to have a worship service the moment the sun starts to come up in the morning, and then the moment it drops below the horizon at night. Our worship times are not under the sun, moon, and stars. But the sun and the moon are still out there. And there's still tides that affect how you feel. And ladies still live by the month. And there's still certain times of the year where you feel depressed every year. And if you don't get enough sunlight, you get sad. Okay? You are still affected by being in this first creation. And because we're still in this first creation, half of us is in the new creation with Jesus, and half of us is still down here, not just wrestling with sin, but dealing with the possibilities and the opportunities of the first creation. We still need buildings because it's going to rain sometimes, and the sun's going to be out sometimes, and it's going to be cold sometimes, so we need buildings. But what will those buildings be like? Well, they will be reflections of the people house. Now, the reason the tabernacle and the temple are somewhat different from each other is because the people are different. The temple is full of gold all over inside and even shiny outside. Because the new thing comes about, we now have this Levitical choir and orchestra that's sending music outside and shining music out all over the place. The word for the shining of music out from the temple or anywhere else is the word keren, which means horn. A horn is also the word for a ray of light. A flashlight gives out a keren. See, Moses had horns of light shining from him when he came down the mountain. You ever see pictures of Moses with real horns? Because they didn't understand. That means rays of light. Okay? Rays of light blasting out. Just like a horn. And if I had a 800-watt flashlight and shone it right in your face, it would be just like if I had a trumpet and went right in your face. Okay? It would really be something. Well, see, once you have these musicians shining out this sound all over the place, then the tabernacle goes from just being a great tent covered with black porpoise skin to being this glorious temple that shines out. Okay? So it's different. Well, now we live in the new covenant. We come together around a table. They weren't coming together around a table. They couldn't even get in there where the table was. We do. And so our architecture is going to reflect something of what our people house looks like. Well, what does the church people house look like? Well, we have ministers of the Word. You're going to need to design with the minister of the Word in mind. You're going to have a throne for the minister as Christ's representative to sit on when he's not standing up and leading you in worship. Are you going to have a white robe for him and a white tablecloth on the table? How are you going to do this? Okay? How are you going to set this up? You have elders. All right? We move in life from being kids to warriors to elders. In the order of the church, we have sexual distinctions. Throughout a great deal of church history, now don't stone me for pointing this out, women sat on one side of the church and men on the other. They didn't sit together by families. And this whole idea, well, we got to sit together by families, that's a new idea. It didn't used to be that way. The whole church was a family, and the ladies were on one side and the men were on the other. Especially the young ladies and the young men. Maybe that would be worth thinking about. But the New Testament makes it plain that there were deaconesses and there were lady elders. Not lady elders. Elder women. Okay? See, a deaconess is not a lady deacon, because the differences between men and women are total. By women who can understand them. All right? The difference between men and women is a reflection of the difference between the Son and the Spirit. Women are glorious and men are not. That means women are associated with the Spirit more than men are. Women are more spiritual than men. Let's just face it, men. It's just a fact. And the late women know it too. They know that we're earthy and that they're spiritual. Well, we can't say that in God, ultimately God is one, and then the difference between the Spirit and the Son doesn't go all the way down. It goes halfway down, and then there's the oneness of God underneath. That's a heresy. Okay? No, God is... The difference between the Spirit and the Son is infinite and absolute, and with the Father, and yet they are at the same time one God. The difference between men and women is total. So women can never be deacons, but they can be deaconesses, which is a different job. And women cannot be elders, but they can be elder women. And the New Testament talks about this, and so does the Old. Look, when we came out of Egypt, there were 3 leaders of the community, Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. It says Miriam was a prophetess. She complains that her prophecies, people give Moses more attention than they give her. But she is a prophetess, okay? Even if she blew it on that one occasion. All right? She's important. And when she dies, the people don't have any water, and she dies, and they find water. That's because women are associated with wells. Her death is even important in the wilderness. It's part of the process. They create Israel, and then later on, when Israel needs to be reformed, we have Samson and Samuel, who are both born the same year, and are both the same age. And you know who else is the same age? Jephthah's daughter. And she goes to the tabernacle and has her 4 days a year conference with the girls. That starts 2 years before Samuel and Samson take over. So she's their same age. And it's the three of them, 2 men and 1 woman, who are bringing about the reformation of Israel over the next 20 years. So we need to know this. All right? We need to overcome our male chauvinist fear of women doing things in the church. Because, see, the feminists want women to be identical to men and do the same things men do. But what we do by responding to that is say women ought not to do anything, and that's a mistake. Okay? You had deaconesses at the tabernacle. You had prophetesses all over the Old Testament. And into the New as well. Philip's daughters were prophetesses. What does that mean? Well, there's loads of things that women need to do with each other that men would probably be well advised to stay out of. And the Bible talks about the older women being set aside to help counsel the younger ones. When you have an older, wise woman, make her a woman elder. Not to sit with the other elders and do the things that male elders do, but to work with women. The deaconesses, who knows? Churches that have done these things. The early church had these things. So we need to think about that. This order of what human beings are in the church. Okay? And then there's the question of multiplication of offices. I mentioned earlier that we decide that we have deacons and we have elders and that's it. But in the Bible, you started off with priests and Levites. But then when we got to the temple, we had priests and we had chief priests. And we divided the Levites up. Some of them were legal experts in the Levitical cities, and theologians. Some of them were musicians. Some of them were guards. There's a whole list of different kinds of Levites. And yet, as our churches grow and develop, and as we move in form and filling and lightening, we kind of resist this, but we shouldn't. We should have an office of musician in our churches, musician deacons, and we should probably have counselors too. I mean, in an age when half the people in this country are psychos, the pastor doesn't have enough time to do all the counseling. Architecture of persons, in addition to the different kinds of people in the churches, in the government of the church. What about the human body? See, we live in a body, and we don't want to live in a body, but we do. That's why when the Psalms say, clap your hands while you sing the Psalms, we don't do it. Because we're reformed. And we'd rather cut our hands off than clap them. Okay? You know it's true. Eugen Rosenstock-Huessy points out that unlike animals, the human body can adopt more positions than any animal can. You can lie down on your back, you can sit up, you can sit forward, you can sit back and relax, you can stand up, you can kneel on one knee, you can kneel on two knees, you can kneel leaning back here like this, okay, you can lie on either side. Your body can do more things than any lion or tiger or even monkey can do. A monkey has a tail that prevents him from doing certain kinds of lying down on his back and stuff like that. Look, the body is part of it, and postures are important in the Bible. So if you're going to design a church, you got to have kneelers, okay? You need to kneel for confession of sin. You need to stand for other kinds of prayer. You need to have enough space to where people can clap their hands during certain singing, okay? Space, body, posture. We need to be more aware of these things. I don't want you hopping around like, whirling dervishes during the worship service, but still. So, these are the kinds of things that when we think about persons and the fact that our churches are reflections of what it means for people to be gathered around God, who those people are, what the kinds of things they do are, including their bodies, their physical bodies, which are instruments of God's praise, then the space in the room would reflect that. Well, the space in the room can reflect the Garden of Eden. You can have some big potted plants here and there in the room. Okay? You want to have thrones down here for the elders and rulers of the church so that we're reminded of the book of Revelation where the angels and the rulers sit on thrones. Okay? We want to realize that since the Bible talks so many times about ladders to heaven, that the idea of kind of looking up is a good idea. And so this part of the church wants to be higher than the part where you are. You don't want to be looking down. Okay? You want somewhat to be looking up, now not like this. You know, I go to some Presbyterian church and there's a pulpit that costs $30,000. It's all, you know, a mile high, and the people in the front row are like this. Now, you don't want that. But you want some sense of being drawn forward. You want the sinner glorified. You go into our churches and the walls are white, and the darkest part of the room is the pulpit and the table. They are brown wood. You have a big dark brown pulpit here. They certainly aren't going to put any white parament on it or any colored thing on it or anything like that. No, it's this big brown, ugly looking, I won't say what comes to mind. And then a brown table down here, and if there's a chair, it's dark. And the whole room, the darkest part of the room is the center. No. This should be the most glorious part of the room. This should be the brightest part of the room, where the flowers are. This should be the shiny part of the room. Your eye should be drawn to the table and to the throne of the Word of God. And if you have a pulpit, you have a big Bible, and that's the throne of the Word, and the Word is always there. Your eye should be drawn there, not drawn out here and thinking it is. Look at the dark, ugly brown place in the middle of the room. Okay? So those are things that you can think about that have to do with architecture. There are other things, you know, if we have this fundamental cross shape, should we think about making a church in a traditional cruciform pattern? And what do we do if we do? See, we do this kind of a church, you wind up, where are you going to put the altar or the table? Altar table. The word altar in the Old Testament means a place where you have a communion meal. That's the meaning of the word altar. It means place of communion. So it's a perfectly good word for a table. You put it way up here, and people who are here can't see it, and you don't have any sense of being gathered around it. The older way was to put the table here, with the pulpit right behind it. Now that leaves a lot of space up here, okay? But you can have your choir here, and just people sitting here, or you can round this off, Celtically. Then you have more room for pews in here like this. Center aisle, of course. Or you can build in a more basilica form, you know, have a square and your area here and gather around it like this. But you want a sense of gathering. In the 19th century, the idea was that we stare into the infinite. So the pews came to be just staring into the infinite. You go back to older churches, the pews will be slanted in. But then they change them to where they look into infinity. We don't want to look into infinity. We want to look at each other, believe it or not, so that we can one another. I mean, when you have dinner, you look at each other, right? Or maybe you don't. But you should. We're gathered around the table. It's, hey, Joe, have some Jesus. You know, relax. This is supposed to be the most relaxed time of the service. You see, in terms of our physical bodies, we come in, we're tense. We have to kneel down and confess our sins. Then we stand up to praise God, and we sit down and relax at the meal. And then we don't want to leave. That's what Peter said. It's good for us to be here. Let's stay here. And Jesus said, no, there's demon-possessed children down at the foot of the mountain. We have to go down there and help them. So that's why you have to be ordered out of the church. See? The last words in the Latin Mass are ite, missa est. That means clear out of here, you're sent forth. Of course, we don't need to be told that because the game is about to come on, so. Missa est. That means clear out of here, you're sent forth. Of course, we don't need to be told that because the game is about to come on, so. Seriously, though, that's the idea. That's why you have a dismissal at the end of the service. A charge, go forth into the world and carry the kingdom that you've been receiving. Okay? Because in a sense, the communion meal should be so relaxed, and we have wine, relax, shalom. That's the movement from tension to rest, from kneeling to standing to sitting. Your architecture has to allow for all that and be favorable to all that. Okay, we can take questions for a couple of minutes on anything. Uh-huh. Well, I have a friend, Rich Bledsoe, who's taking work in missions, and he was telling me about some study that they read that goes into all that and the dynamics of sizes of churches. And this is interesting. It bears into your question. A church gets to a certain size and then it tends not to grow. For every family that comes in, somebody tends to leave or move away. This is the first place that this happens is the church where everybody knows everybody else. There's maybe 35 or 40 families in the church. If you break through that, you wind up in a situation where there are groups of people in the church. People in the church know, oh, they took a trip out to Las Vegas to gamble for a week. Or whatever. But when you get to the next level, you get to the 150 family member church, somebody can be absent and you have to search around to find somebody, and it may be that nobody will even know that they're gone. You get to the next level beyond that, and you definitely have all kinds of groups in the church. Well, then you have these large churches, and they naturally break up into small groups for certain kinds of pastoral purposes. And the functionality of the church itself at the pastoral level is in smaller groups. Now, I think there is a limit to the size of the church if you understand that you're gathering for a meal and that you're going to do this every week. The sheer logistics and the time it takes to do that means you're not going to have a 20,000 member church. You can only have that if your church is just a preaching point where they go hear the star preacher. And then that's got nothing to do really with the rest of their lives. They might as well watch him on television because their real life consists of the Sunday school class that they're part of, and their Sunday school teacher is their real pastor. And that's the way these large Baptist and Pentecostal churches work. So that the worship service itself is nothing but really a preaching entertainment, or something worse, it's a rock band that entertains us and some skits and some other stuff. It tends not to be that. So I do think that there is a certain size limit. And I think we tend to think, church, and then we think of European cathedrals. But as I was saying to someone the other day, European cathedrals are not, they can function as churches, but if you go into a cathedral and the worship is taking place, it's probably taking place over in one little part of the room, okay? Because the cathedral itself should be thought of more like a statue or a painting. It's a large piece of art that publicly declares this is Christian space. And it takes a long time to build, and you build it in a capital city or in a big city, and it's highly decorated, but it's not really built to be a functioning place of worship, except for a few people. The main purpose of it is to make an artistic statement. So I think that giant cathedral type building needs to be evaluated more as a piece of Christian art than as a place of worship. As a piece of Christian art, hey, it's great stuff. Let's go look at them. But there's like going to a museum and looking at Rembrandt, or going to a concert hall and hearing Shostakovich or something. It's not the same as designing a place of worship. So I think that's another thing to keep in mind, because I think sometimes you think, I'd like a church to be like Chartres or something. Well, why? That has a certain meaning as an artistic statement at the monument building phase of a civilization. And we're not at the monument building phase of our civilization, and we don't have the money to make a big artistic statement like that. We're looking for a house of worship.
Of course, with anecdotally, 100 people in a planting missional situation, 27 times more effective evangelistically than a church of 1,000 people. Also find it interesting.
Yeah, you're getting into these kinds of studies yourself right now, aren't you? Yeah.
It's also interesting in my own situation. When I've over 400, it's really funny. It's typical. I mean, this is how I started younger in my life. You kind of want to have a larger church for reasons both good and bad, probably. Then you get that larger church, and all of your staff meetings are basically asking one question, and it's always, how can we make this larger church feel like a small church? I'm really convinced that a smaller church is better. I think it's better to start churches than to build big ones.
Yeah. Well, you see, if you look in Israel and at the early church, there was more collegiality. We talk about the church at Geneva in Calvin's time. Well, those 100-member churches would get together periodically for larger meetings. And the church at Ephesus might have consisted of several house churches, or they're not really house churches, that's the myth. But, pastors, and then they come together from time to time. And we don't have so much of that. It's, there again, we start with the mega church and break it up into Sunday schools, but then we don't really have any effective communion table going. And it'd be better to have scattered communion tables and then come together from time to time. Yes, ma'am. Okay. No, I'm just agreeing with you.
There's no correlation between small and humble. That's what
Yeah, hunger inside. Okay, well, I think the clock says we have 2 minutes to lower it down. That's right. So,
any other urgent questions that we can get? We'll take one, good. All right, I think we'll stand and we'll sing St. Patrick's